Hi, welcome back. In this session, we are going to discuss about the for loop in Python. As we discussed earlier in our previous session about the loops. So loops is nothing but it used to execute or run a bunch of code again and again until a certain condition met. For example, in for loop, we will give the number of times the line of code to be executed. For example, I have a line of code here, print this is a for loop. So this will only print once, but using a for loop, we can execute this code or this printing this strings. This is a for loop again and again, how much ever times we want. So we will see a simple for loop. For that, I just created a variable x equal to a list. So I have added few numbers 896, 1896. Then I run this code. So print x is nothing but a list. Now I am writing a simple for loop. So for I in x. So don't worry about this syntax. We will come into that. We will talk very detail about that. Just trying to understand the for loop. Just try to understand how it works and the lines and everything, all the each variables, the I, x, and all those things we will discuss in detail later. So I'm writing a for loop for I in x. I am printing using this line of code which we discussed earlier. Print this is a for loop, and also here for loop also indentation is very important. That means anything should be run repeatedly, should be within the for loop. That is, it should not be just below here or in line with the for loop. Instead of 1, 2, 3, 4 times the space here, this is called indentation. So this line of code will repeat. So I'm just running this code and see. So if we can see this same line of code here repeated 4 times, and we haven't given any number that okay, repeat it by 4 times or 6 times. We haven't given any input, but with just this simple line of code, two line of code, it repeated 4 times. So from where actually got this 4, this count? So we can see another example. Again the same, the list x or variable x, I changed to another 10 and 20. Two more I added here. Now the x become 1, 8, 9, 6, 10, 20. And again, I'm using the same for loop. Or instead of x, I can use another variable y and print y here. So it is 1, 8, 9, 6, 10. Now I am running this code. Instead of x in the for loop, I am using y here. So for I in y, print this code. Now we will see how much time it will execute. If we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now it executed 6 times. So from where actually this 6 count comes? So if you see the difference of both the loops, we can see first we use the variable x which has 4 elements. So if you are seeing the length of x, len of x, it is sorry, length of x, execute this, and length of x is 4. And if you are seeing the length of y here, len of y, it is 6. That is what is executed 6 times. That means the input to run, how much time we have to repeat the line of code, is getting from the length of the variable we had given here. So when the x is only 4 elements, when the variable have only length 4, so that will take here, and that much time the loop will execute. So when we are again changing another variable, suppose instead of a list, I am taking a string. So yz equals a string, python, Python. Now print z is nothing but Python, and if length of z is checking, it is nothing but 6. Or we can add one more time, one more Python learn Python, okay, Python 3. So now we am executing, it is length is now 7. Now I am again using this variable z in the for loop. So how to write? For I in z, print this is a for loop. This is a for loop. Now, can you imagine how much time it will print this line of code or which is inside the for loop? We can see yes, it is 7 times because the length of z is 7. That is from where the for loop gets the count how much time the loop should execute this line of code or how much time you should repeat the line of code within the for loop. That is about the count. The next is the most important thing is the iteration in for loop. And suppose if I am checking this I is also a variable here. For example, I am running the same for loop here for I in Z. Instead of printing a simple text, I am printing the value of I is, I am just checking what is I here. So I am running this code. We can see every time. That is, we know earlier we discussed it will execute 7 times because the length of Z is 7. So it will execute 7 times. When it's executing 7 times, it is actually now we are asking to print the value of I. So the value of I, if we can see every time it is changing. Python. That means whenever, so from where this P is coming, if you are checking Z, Z is nothing but print Z is nothing but Python 3. So whenever is iterating or coming down from the for loop every time, it will change the value of I with from the Z. That means it will pick one value from Z. So the first element of the Z is P. So first time it will store I equal to P, then come down and run this code. So value of I is now what is P. So it printed this, then again go back to the loop, for loop again back here, and it's again come stored or pick the next one of Python Z, that is Y. So now the value of I become Y and come here and printed the value of I is Y here printed. Now again go back up to the loop, again take the third one that is T from Python, then it's come back, the value of I is T until it will execute the whole thing. That means up to 7, up to the 3. That means it will have 7 elements, so it will execute 7 times. This is more important, most important. That is the for loop we used to iterate also the elements. So if you are seeing the previous example, so previous one is we have seen this list. X is the list here. So I'm writing keeping the list X. So X is nothing but 18910. Now I'm writing for I in X. Print value of I is X. If I'm executing this line, we can see, oh, sorry, not X here, value of I is nothing but value of first I is 1. That is nothing but the first element of the list. Then the second time when it's executing, it become 8. That is the second element of 8 up to 6. So that is the iteration in for loop. So two important thing, how many times the loop should run, that gets from the length of the variable we are giving to iterate. And the next second point is that it will every time it will iterate or pick one element from the variable and store it in a temporary variable I. So we can use that I for any calculations or anything or any computation. So the next is that we may think it's I is a standard one. Actually, no, we can give any variable there. So instead of I can give J, or I can give some other string also. So I'm giving J in X. Print value of, instead of value of I am using value of I. Instead of I will take J. That means the one first value will stored in the J and come here, print J, and again go back second value which will stored in J. So that means this middle one we can use anything we want, but it should not be same as X because there is no logic in that. So this is a temporary variable, so it will iterate every element from the variable X and stored in that. That is the basic concepts of for loop. Okay, one more thing before that, we know that we have length here. So we how much the loop should run, that depends on the length of element. So suppose I want to type, instead of this j, I want to type from 1 to 10, print 1 to 10. So what I can use, for I in 10, print I, or print value of I is I. So let me just try to run this. When we are giving here, instead of x, or we can change the value of x equal to 10 and running this, and here we can give x to avoid confusion. Or so it is not actually giving an output, because the reason is that now x is an integer now, not a list or not a string. Now, can we check the length of x, or length of 10? Length of x now is nothing but there is no length object for an integer, or there is no length object for a float. So I'm checking the length of an integer, or I'm checking a length of a float. Float means 10.5. So it will not have a length for integer or float. So in that means we cannot use here in the for loop a direct integer. Instead of, if you want to print that, we need to use range function. That is, for I in range 0 to 10, print I. This will execute up to 0 to 9, it will execute. So that is one of the most important thing in for loop. When we are starting to write for loop, it may have a confusion, it's not working. Like initially, why this integer? If I'm giving x is equal to 10 and integer, it will not work, because the reason is that the integer doesn't have a length. So for loop doesn't get the number of times to run, or from where it's not getting, it's not getting how to run, how many times I have to run. So that actually taken from the length of the element. So here, if we are giving an integer, there is no length for the integer, so there is no input for the for loop to execute, so it will give an error. So if you want to run up to an integer like this, then we have to use range function in for loop. And there are other functions also in for loop, so that we can discuss earlier, because we can discuss more detail, more modifications of this for loop. So that will be discussed in the part B of Python. That is nothing but intermediate. Here we are just trying to understand the basic concepts of Python and all the other functions in Python.